What's going on, everybody? Week 10 college football. Here for another edition of the SHIPIT Nation College Football Show. My name's Bill. Put a dollar in front of it. You'll find me on Discord and Twitter. I'm glad to have you here. We're ready for another week of college football. A lot of good things happened last week. We found some things out about guys. We have a team on the slate this week that lost a 35-point lead. Something ridiculous like that, but we'll get to that in a minute. But first things first, we're still pushing to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we're at 8,600-ish right now. But we do have some special plans in the works for when we do get to 10,000. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe right below. Easy way to tell. If it says subscribed with a D at the end, you already are. If it just says subscribe, click it. Super easy, super simple. It'll help us get to 10K, and you'll join the party when we celebrate. But this week, we're going to jump right into the slate. 12-game slate on DraftKings. The contests are pretty similar to what we expect from DraftKings on most weeks. Stick to the 20 max and single entry for the better payout structures. We're not doing a listener league this week because it didn't fill last week, but we're just going to leave that there. And that's going to be that. But we're starting off with an academy game. Everybody's favorite. Always bet the under, right? Well, not when Army scores 50 points a game by themselves. Okay, maybe not 50, but 40 is not out of the realm of possibility. They could cover this over on their own. But we're playing DFS. And we're looking at Air Force, not for very long, though. They have a 10-point team total. They don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, Quentin Hayes was hurt, so he didn't start, but it'll be Hayes and Busha. Honestly, I could say something about these guys. Like, I know who Jared Rosnos is. Like, he's played there for a few years, but you're not playing any Air Force guys in this unless you're psycho. I mean, they're cheap. There you go. That's what I can give you. And you know what? If you want to spend money in your lineup, play an Air Force guys and hope that one of them catches a 90-yard touchdown. It has happened before. Be my guest. Really just looking at the Army side on this. Bryson Daly had 38 DK points in 5 straight games, including a 60-burger last week. He has 110-plus yards rushing in all but one game, and he can pass. Like Bryson Daly, 9,200. He should probably be up in the Cam Ward range, maybe even more expensive than Cam Ward. But the disrespect for these group of 5 schools, especially the academies, is just, just showing your hand, showing your true feelings here, DraftKings. Besides Bryson Daly, though, Kanye, Udo, in the night I hear him talk. He's getting touches. He'll probably see 15 to 20 touches, and that's not bad for a 5,500 guy. Noah Short has 5 touchdowns on the year, and Casey Reynolds leads the team in targets with 16, but he does have 3 touchdowns. So it really just Daly's the first guy you're looking at, maybe Udo. But beyond that, you're not looking at much from this game. 31-point team total, and Daly could get it all by himself. Memphis at UTSA. Remember when I said that somebody blew a 35-point lead? I think maybe it was 35-7 at halftime. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They blew a big lead at Tulsa last week. A lot of bettors that on their SHIPIT Nation team down in Tunica, Mississippi weren't too happy about that. Anyway, on the Memphis side, we got Seth Hennigan. Probably too cheap for this matchup. UTSA is kind of a pass funnel. And their run defense actually isn't that bad. So I kind of like the pass game here. Like the only 2 teams that, average more than 3 yards a carry against UTSA was Texas and Texas State. 2 very good running offenses, and obviously Texas just being the bigger school. But Seth Hennigan, 7,600, I think is a fair price, and you could easily pair him with Rock Taylor and Demir Blankham. See, those are the 2 familiar names we know. They get the target share again this year. They're 6,000 and 6,300 is probably fair. But then you got Kobe Drake. He's more of a spike guy. He'll have a big game every now and again. Landfear, just steady as she goes as a tight end, 3,400. Don't mind that for how much he's on the field. But Mario Anderson, truly is like Mekhi Hughes was last week. He's underpriced because he's an American Conference school. DeRosier and Brandon Thomas, they're trending toward not playing. Brandon Thomas is one of those guys that can snag touchdowns at any time. And if you play Anderson, you're going to be super angry when you see Brandon Thomas has a stat line, 3 carries for 2 yards and 3 touchdowns or something dumb like that. But we might not even have to worry about it. 7,800 more than fair for Anderson. And even if you are concerned about UTSA's vaunted run defense, he does get 4.5 targets a game. So Anderson, kind of, I don't want to call it a can't miss spot, but like I said, Mekhi Hughes last week, copy paste this week for Mario Anderson. On the UTSA side, Owen McCown is 6,100. They have a team total of 27 points. And, McCown is in play because of his price and because they're going to need to throw out a necessity. There's a good chance they throw 40 to 50 times in this game. It would not shock me at all. And just the opportunity is there for McCown. Even if he throws a couple of picks don't hurt you that much in DFS that he can't overcome it. Robert Henry is $4,000 for a starting running back. And he actually had 20 carries last week, and he'll get 4 to 5 targets a game as well. So I don't mind that. Barnes is still involved in the offense, but why wouldn't you pay $200 more for the guy who's been getting the usage? It's kind of where I say with that running game. And then Devin McQueen missed last week, and he's probably not going to play this week. It's something, it's a group of 5 schools, so it might be tough to get news. But he is their leading wide receiver, but his status is still unsure. Beyond him, you're going to see McCoy, you're going to see Carpenter, you're going to see Thomas. Those are the 3 guys they all had 10 targets last week, and Carpenter had 11 the week before. So those are the 3 guys if McQueen does end up sitting. Obviously you're going to look at McQueen a little bit if he does play, and it could hurt those guys. But those are the 3. So a very stackable game, very easy to stack with the pricing. Even if you wanted to play Hennigan and one of his receivers or Anderson, you can run it back with cheap UTSA guys. I don't mind that at all. I'll be looking at these guys in cash too, just because of the pricing and the team totals. And kind of like I said, kind of like Tulane was last week against North Texas. You're playing the guys because of the volume, and they're cheap and they're just mispriced. Ole Miss at Arkansas, a 7-point spread. 30 and 23 seems a little bit high after watching Ole Miss play these last few weeks. They do have a good defense, and their offense hasn't really been, super impressive. But obviously, the big news is Trey Harris is questionable again. He missed last week, and it was kind of just a mad game for everybody. Caden Prescorn had his highest targets of the season, and he had a touchdown. So I'm always looking at the tight end position, especially Caden Prescorn kind of holds a special place in our hearts. So yeah, Caden Lee's in a good spot if Harris misses. Wells is in a good spot if Harris misses. You might even consider playing those guys because they're cheap, even if Harris plays. But if Harris goes 9,500, it's hard. But honestly, don't blame DraftKings for pricing him up because he'll get 12 to 15 targets and catch almost all of them. Arkansas is kind of a pass funnel, so I don't mind Jackson Dart even at 9,300. I'd rather play the passing game against Arkansas than the running game. Now, that's not to say that Parrish and Bentley aren't in play. Bentley didn't get a whole lot of work last week after, seeing increased usage the week before. So Parrish is still getting that kind of RB1 work, especially with Matt Jones and, Logan Diggs not seeing the field because of injury. And Daquan Wright is another one I want to talk about. Last week without Trey Harris, the other tight end, the transfer from Virginia Tech, he saw his most targets of the season as well. It was only 4, but it was his first start of the season. They started 2 tight ends. So just something to consider. I don't know that you're playing it other than MME. On the Arkansas side, Jaquin Jackson is out. Braylon Russell's a 4-star freshman. Really did well, 16 rushes for 175 yards last week. And Rashad Dubinion had 11 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown. So Doobie kind of has that little edge because of the touchdown last week, but Russell looked really good. I don't know if you're going to target that against Ole Miss. I do like that Arkansas is at home, but it's one of those things where he's 3,500. You're not going to get a 3,500 RB1 in a lot of cases. And again, it's tough to say if he's RB1 or not. Rodney Hill is expected to be back, so he'll be in the mix too. Taylor Green is priced about right for Arkansas. I think, at 7,500 though, Ole Miss really hasn't faced a true dual threat quarterback, at least nobody like Taylor Green. So that might be the saving grace for him. I don't hate it. Don't love it. Don't hate it. Arkansas's at home again. That kind of helps. Andrew Armstrong's kind of in that price range where I'm not sure if I want to play him against the Ole Miss defense. Luke has had 2 touchdowns last week. But that was against Mississippi State. So maybe take that with a grain of salt. But the one thing I did find about, Andrew Armstrong's potential here, 6,600 is probably too cheap for him overall as a receiver. Matchup is the reason he's probably priced down. But Kyron Lacey had 5 for 111 and 1 against Ole Miss. Dane Key had 8 for 105 and 1 against Ole Miss. Even Derwin Burgess at Georgia Southern had 5 for 53 and a touchdown. So wide receiver ones have been finding success against Ole Miss. And Andrew Armstrong is definition wide receiver one. There's a huge drop off after him for Arkansas. So I don't mind giving him a look, especially, in a potential game stack with these cheap wide receivers over here, a mid-price quarterback. It does open up a lot if you do target this game and Arkansas can put up points. Duke at Miami, big revenge game. Manny Diaz returning to Miami as the Duke head coach. He's going to be fired up if he can get his players to fire up with him. I know they're a 20.5-point underdog and they're on the road. So take it all with a grain of salt here. Malik Murphy, he did have the ceiling game last week, but he had to throw the ball 48 times to get it, and that was against SMU. I do think Miami has a better defense than SMU. So I don't know that I'm looking at him even at 6K. At MME, maybe you're taking a shot here or there. But the reason you're doing that is because he's got cheap receivers to pair with. Eli Pankel is taking over the wide receiver one role, and he's only 4,500. He's gotten more usage than Jordan Moore. Jordan Moore has had some lingering injuries. He's played through them, so that's definitely something to consider. You're getting a cheaper wide receiver at the top spot. Samir Haggins is the third guy. But after that, it's a pretty clear drop off. Jake Taylor, a very interesting note. Jake Taylor's probably going to be the starting tight end with Del Mullen and Hasley out. After him, some dude named Vance Bolliard. And then there's a guy, Tony Boggs, who's like potentially the second string tight end and going to see the field. That's not even on DraftKings because he was a defensive lineman who converted to an offensive lineman. And now he's playing tight end. So I just wasted 15 seconds talking about something that's not relevant at all to DFS, other than the fact that we are all going to be tilting when somebody who wasn't on DraftKings scores a touchdown. Tony Boggs is the name, in case you forgot. So I'm not really looking at much on Duke. Star Thomas is in a decent spot. I mean, he's still getting running back one usage. Jaquez Moore was supposed to be back last week, or at least that's the way it was trending, and then he didn't play. So, one would think that he's probably going to be ready to go this week. But that's, it's really yet to be determined. Virginia Tech, Louisville, FSU, Florida State actually had some success running the ball against Miami, so I don't hate it. And 5,900 is, again, middle ground. On the Miami side, Cam Ward is Cam Ward. He finally had a floor game, and it was a basement floor game, 15 points. Like, that's half of what he normally scores. And at 10-8, that would crush you. That crushes because you need that to pay off. You need 30 points from him. Especially on a 12-game slate. Could he get 30 points against Duke? I don't see why not. But Duke has been slogging down these games that they've been playing. If you watch Duke, it's very slow going and methodical, and they crush your soul. Duke crushes your soul. Their defense is soul crushing. Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher have kind of been splitting in the backfield. Martinez has just been more efficient. He's been getting the touchdowns, but I do like the $2,300 discount. If you're going to play this backfield, I actually don't really mind either of them. I don't think I would play them together, especially against Duke. It's so weird saying I don't want to play this Duke offense. It is weird. But I will say Duke has given up 3.9 a carry in 6 straight games or more, 3.9 or more. And that, 3.9 might not sound like much, but that included Middle Tennessee State and Connecticut. So, there is probably some opportunity there. And the wide receiver core for Miami, Xavier Restrepo, still probably wide receiver one, although Horton has been starting and he has gotten more targets than Restrepo in 2 of the last 3 games. Restrepo is kind of like that nookie blanky slot receiver that, when all else fails, just throw it to Restrepo. But Horton, you get a $1,700 discount and then a huge discount to Sam Brown. Jacoby George is still involved, but Horton has actually been starting over George. So that's something to consider. And Brown's cheaper. I mean, Brown and George, you could, flip a coin on which one's going to have the better game. So you might as well take the discount. And then Arroyo at tight end. Never mind a $3,100 tight end who's going to be on the field. I don't know if this game's stackable. I think if Duke keeps it close, it's probably because their defense is stopping Miami from scoring. I don't know if it's a shootout. I don't know if Duke can keep up. So that's my concern with any sort of stack in this game, although you do have some cheap pieces on the Duke side that I like. Minnesota, Illinois. How about that Minnesota offense last week? They're they all saw some price increases, and rightfully so, after he scored 48 points. Max Brosmer continues to look better and better each week. 320 yards passing last week against Maryland. And teams that haven't thrown the ball well against Illinois either couldn't or they're running teams. So there is opportunity here, even in a road game against what is perceived to be a pretty good pass defense. I think there's opportunity here at 6,000. I mean, they raised his price by $1,000, but it's probably still too cheap. Darius Taylor, there's not much to say about him. He's a workhorse running back, and he's second on the team in carries. 8,400 is still too cheap. He should probably be closer to 9K. The rest of the running room has been kind of a mess. Major will see the field the most, but beyond that, your guess is as good as mine, and I'm a Gophers fan. Daniel Jackson priced up to almost where he should be, 5,800. I'm still giving him a look. He had a ceiling game maybe last week with 35 DK points, but even if he gets 25, that's still over 4x. So if he does 10 points worse than last week, you're still sitting pretty. The one thing I will say is that Elijah Spencer is kind of on the same track as Brosmer, just from a wide receiver perspective. He's getting a lot more looks. He's gotten better throughout the season. He was here last year, but he was a little bit banged up. I say here. He was in Minnesota. I'm in Minnesota, in case you didn't know. By the way, it's snowing here. So that's something to keep in mind for all of the northern states, is that we're getting snow, the week of Halloween, first weekend in November. So keep that in mind as we go through these games. Anybody, that's in the Midwest, North, weather might be a concern. Anyway, Spencer has taken on a bigger role, and he's doing well. Jamison Gears, tight end, always an option, for a couple of touchdowns. And then Lemeki Brockington, athletic wide receiver, maybe the most athletic wide receiver on the team. He's got a super high ceiling. We just haven't seen it yet. On the Illinois side, Luke Altmaier's cheap. It's just flat out too cheap. I mean, Minnesota has a good pass defense, ranked very highly in the nation. Prior to last week, they'd only faced like one really good passing offense. I guess UCLA kind of is. They faced USC. And Maryland had, I think, 323 yards passing. But a lot of that was in garbage time. So, that's going to skew it a little bit. I do think this pass defense is still very good. But Illinois is at home, and Luke Altmaier's 5,500. So I don't mind taking a shot on him. This backfield is a big question mark. Aiden Lafferty actually got more carries last week than Josh McCray did, but it was a blowout against Oregon. So it's really tough to figure out what you want to take from that game and how it applies to the next week. I do think McCray is still going to be running back one, but it seems like they are giving Lafferty a lot of opportunity. And lo and behold, Khalil Valentine was a touchdown scorer last week, and actually the highest graded running back out of the bunch on PFF. Zachary Franklin, I'm giving him wide receiver one projections. I mean, he's shown that he's wide receiver one. He was wide receiver one when he was at UTSA, didn't get a shot at Ole Miss, and now he's at Illinois. Pat Bryant's still a solid option, but he is coming off of a head injury. I know he's probable, but head injuries can be tricky. So I love the discount on Franklin. I love the volume Franklin's getting. That's one of those things. I don't really care how good or bad you think Minnesota's pass defense is. Zachary Franklin's on my radar. I love this game as a sneaky game stack. If you want to run Taylor and run it back with an Altmaier Franklin, I don't mind it. If you want to go Brosmer, Taylor, Jackson, a triple stack, that worked last week, and they're still cheap enough it could work again, and then run it back with Franklin or even Brian if he goes. And then, Colin Dixon, he's cheap, but he's just a starter. That's really all he is. And regardless of how good you think Minnesota's defense is, wide receiver ones have had some success against them. Ty Felton, J. Michael Sturdivant, Kyron Hudson even had a big game, even though USC spreads it out. So I don't mind that at all as a game stack. A little bit sneaky, a lower total. People might not be on it quite as much. Ohio State, Penn State, similar total to the last game, but I think this will actually be a better real life football game than it will be for DFS because a lot of these guys are just more expensive than the last game. You look at them, it's almost identical when it comes to the team totals and spread and everything. You're just going to notice a big difference in pricing. Will Howard probably is just too expensive for a matchup in Happy Valley. Could he have a ceiling game? Yes. I mean, is it possible? I think our boy Hamhock actually won a GPP stacking Oregon and Ohio State earlier this year because Will Howard had a ceiling game on the road against a very good defense. Could it happen here? I don't see why not. Judkins and Henderson, it's just been kind of a weird backfield. They didn't look good at all last week. Both of them have been less efficient in Big Ten play. They're going to both see 9 to 12 carries, maybe 15 total touches max. And for that price, I don't know why you would want to get there. If they do get a hot hand and one of them does see an increase in usage, could they get there? Sure. They're both talented enough to do it. But with the other running backs that are clear workhorses on this slate, I don't know that I'm going to get there. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka. Yes, Carnell Tate had the touchdowns last week, but Smith and Egbuka are still the two guys. Smith has a touchdown in every single game as a freshman, which is absolutely nuts. He's just a freak. Gee Scott in play if Kaczmarek misses again. I do think Kaczmarek is trending toward not playing. On the Penn State side, the biggest question mark is Drew Aller. I don't think you're playing him if he's in. Even if he's in, there is still the concern where he's like, oh, I'm getting up, I'm playing for this Ohio State game. And then he gets out there and 2 drives in, he's like, I shouldn't have played this Ohio State game. It's very possible. Bo Pribula is more of a running quarterback. The one thing I will say is like when Pribula was in last week, he favored the tight ends. He favored the backs out of the backfield, like throwing the ball to him. And then he favored, slot wide receivers, William Clifford, for example. So, the shorter, easier throws to make, which bodes well for Tyler Warren, who might be on track to be a Heisman candidate if he continues his success. Completely different discussion for another time. But if Aller plays, makes Harrison Wallace a little bit more in play. Harrison Wallace is just too cheap. Pribula did find him a few times last week after he came in. So at 3,900, I don't mind taking a shot on Wallace. But it is Warren. He's the clear favorite regardless of who plays quarterback. In the backfield, it's been a split basically ever since Singleton missed that game against UCLA. I think Allen actually had more carries last week, but Singleton is more involved in the passing game. Singleton has touchdowns in 3 of his last 4. Both had 4 targets last week. And Oregon and Iowa are the only teams to average more than 4 carries or 4 yards per carry against Ohio State. So, even if it wasn't a split, I don't know that I'd love a running back against Ohio State. The only thing that, captures my attention is probably the price on Katron Allen. Anyway, better real life football game than DFS game, in my opinion. Florida at Georgia. Georgia, massive favorites. Makes sense, even though it's at a neutral site. I think it's at a neutral site. I might have to double check that. I shouldn't speak before I think. Trey Wilson's going to be out again for Florida. He had an underwhelming return in the couple of games that he did play, but what that does really is it just makes Badger and DK more in play. And it makes Aiden Mizell, potentially playable at all. So they're cheap. Georgia's defense doesn't scare me in the pass game as much as it used to. I know it's Georgia, but Mississippi State threw for more than 300 yards against Georgia. So that's really all I need to know that it's possible and Florida can do it. DJ Lagway at 4,800. It's a price play. I mean, what did he throw? Complete 7 passes last week or 6 passes, something ridiculous like that. But at 4,800, you don't need a whole lot. The backfield's interesting because Montrell Johnson is on the injury report as questionable. He has been practicing and coming out of the bye. He should be good to go, but you think they would list him as probable on the SEC injury report. I'm not sure why they didn't. Jaden Baugh is a name that everybody knows now. He's a 3-star running back. Maybe the better running back, but it's probably some Montrell's backfield. But Baugh had 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. I mean, that's one of the most ridiculous stat lines you'll ever see, especially from a freshman running back in the SEC. But it was crazy. And, at the very least, he might be a little bit more involved. Montrell's too cheap, but I don't know. I'd rather attack Georgia through the passing game, and I just don't know if Florida's going to be able to throw the ball on him. Carson Beck at 7,900. He's right in that middle range, but a team total of 34. You're always going to look at the plays on the favored side of the ball. The one thing I will say is Florida's defense looks really good on paper, but I don't know if they faced a real passing attack since they played Miami, and Miami had 385 and 5 on them. So, Texas A&M, Marcel Reed started the game they played against Texas A&M, is just look at their game logs. Find me a good passing attack in that game log. So I don't mind Beck here, especially if he's going to fly under the radar. But everybody's looking at Trevor Etienne, and that's probably why Beck is flying under the radar, is because Etienne used to go to Florida, and this is a revenge game for him. The one thing about Etienne, though, is it's a revenge game for Florida, too, because Etienne left Florida. He's like, why would I be a backup running back on a losing team when I could go start at a winning team? So it's going to be emotional for both sides probably. But ETN at 6,500 with the volume he's been getting is in a great spot. Especially Roderick Robinson and Branson Robinson are both going to miss again. So you're going to see a heavy workload of ETN, a sprinkle of Frazier, and a dash of Cash in that backfield. And then if you like Beck, you got to like at least one or two of his receivers, right? Smith, Bell, and Lovett, top three guys. After those three, the next closest in targets is ETN. So there's a clear drop-off. Delp and Lucky, they're not Brock Bowers, so I'm not even worried about that. But again, there's cheap enough pieces on the Florida side. If you want to do a mini game stack here, I don't hate it, but mostly looking at the Georgia side. A game that's going to be very confusing, Arizona at UCF. Arizona is a 6-point underdog, and they're traveling multiple time zones. Fafita finally had a big game. He had like 28 DK points last week at home against West Virginia, a team that had to travel time zones the other way, and they jacked up his price, $2,000. So it almost makes him unplayable here. He just hasn't been good most of the season. One spike game, and it's an overreaction on pricing. So the upside is obviously there. We've seen it. We saw it just last week, especially when he has Tet McMillan. Tet McMillan had 40 points last week. So again, it's a very expensive stack, but the upside is there. If you can get 60 points from those two guys, you're sitting all right. Quali Conley in the backfield, he's getting workhorse numbers. He had 16 carries last week. And Iowa State, BYU both ran the ball on UCF, so why couldn't Arizona? Again, I don't like the travel. I don't like that Arizona's on the road in this one. But yeah, again, in the wide receiver core after McMillan, Lamonius Craig has had one target combined the last 2 games. Burnett is a tight end who's probably the second option now, but I don't love it. On the UCF side, new play caller on offense. We think Malzahn fired himself. New defensive coordinator. Kobe Hudson is questionable, trending more toward probably not playing. He had a pretty gnarly injury that kept him out most of the game last week. But that leaves 2 cheap pass catchers in Pittman and Whitmore. But it's just a matter of who's going to play quarterback. We think it's probably going to be Ja'Cory Brown. They said he's their guy, but Rizek had some time last week. It's not really exactly clear who's going to start, but basically everything that you read in UCF, if you read through the tea leaves, is just it's just going to be RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey, 9,300. Don't even care what he's priced at. Everything's probably going to run through him. That's what I mean. It's weird because you think with a total of 56 and less than a touchdown spread, you'd want to stack this game. But the usage and pricing is just right that you're probably only looking at 2 to 3 guys in this entire game, which also means it might be sneaky. So maybe stack this game and hope that your quarterback doesn't get replaced on one side and hope that your quarterback doesn't have another 10-point floor game on the other. Like, it's tough. I don't mind the game. It's just difficult to figure out what you want to do with it. Kansas State at Houston, a little less difficult to figure out what I want to do because Kansas is a 13.5-point road favorite against a pretty bad football team. Avery Johnson, 8,000 it's a fair price. He's dual threat. He's probably too cheap. And now Kansas State, they're chasing BYU and Iowa State. They need one of those teams to lose because Kansas State has a loss and Iowa State and BYU are undefeated. Kansas State might be the better team, but they might miss the Big 12 championship because of that one loss. So they need to win every game. They need to play like it's the Big 12 championship every week. But Avery Johnson, 8K doesn't scare me. Giddens, 7,600 doesn't scare me. He's a workhorse running back. Dylan Edwards at 3,600. I don't even mind that. But Giddens is going to be the workhorse. And Jace Brown, just the disrespect from DraftKings. 4,200 for a wide receiver 1. I know there was a couple of weeks there where we thought maybe Keegan Johnson was taking over, but Jace Brown, both of them are too cheap, but Jace Brown at wide receiver 1 for 4,200. It's just, you shouldn't see that kind of pricing on a wide receiver 1. On the Houston side, they're all price plays. Zion Chris is going to run a little bit more than Donovan Smith. But what that does, in my eyes, it does kind of hurt the wide receivers a little bit. I know Muse had 9 targets a couple weeks ago. Johnson and Manjack they're good wide receivers that are going to be on the field. It's just going to be tough to get there unless, if you want to run back, it's probably going to make you a little bit different and it's super cheap. That's the biggest thing with this. Everybody on this team is a price play. So I'm not going to talk you off the ledge if you love the Houston side, but I'm not going to tell you to go out of your way to play these guys either. It's, it is what it is. Kansas State's favored for a reason, and I think they're probably going to blow the doors off of Houston, especially with the scenario they're in for the season. Texas Tech and Iowa State. Texas Tech is a 13-point underdog on the road as well. But they're a 13-point underdog that's going to score 21 points. It does make a difference, when the total is so high. Morton went down last game with a shoulder, but he should be good to go. Taj Brooks is Taj Brooks, 100 yards in every single game. Arkansas State is the only team who couldn't run on Iowa State. And Central Florida just ran for 9.1 yards per carry. So tell me it's a bad matchup for Taj Brooks. I don't think so. In the wide receiver core, Josh Kelly has been wide receiver 1 all year, but Caleb Douglas continues to catch up. Douglas has had a few big games. It's more like a wide receiver 1A and wide receiver 1B. And Douglas is much cheaper. So, if I'm picking between the two, I'm going to take the discount. However, it's weird because he should be higher owned the last 3 weeks, he should have been higher owned, but he hasn't been. So we'll see if the ownership gets there this week. But if it doesn't, I'm all over Douglas. And on the Iowa State side, it's the usual suspects in the passing game. Becht is too cheap. That's way too cheap for a quarterback that can pass and run. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, that's where the ball's going. It's a team with a 35-point team total, and you know where the ball's going to go. I mean, that's exactly what we want. Higgins and Noel are playable probably together because of the usage they get. Higgins has been the guy, and then Noel just has 16 targets last week. I like Noel a little bit more because he's cheaper, but there's no reason Higgins can't get there at 6,700. So, a Taj Brooks with a Becht, Higgins, Noel run back is not out of the realm of possibility. And then they have cheap wide receivers. I mean, Carson Hansen was on a tear. And then he got taken out of the game last week because he got hurt. And then look at that. We saw Abu Sama again. So, Jackson is still involved as probably the running back too. But there's a chance we could see 3 running backs. I do think Hansen is the lead back, but it's really tough to gauge exactly what's going to happen until we see, how they approach with 3 healthy running backs, if Sama really is back in the mix or if it's just because Hansen went down. But yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you can stack this game. I don't mind stacking Morton with Douglas and Kelly either. There's a bunch of different ways you can go. I like this game in all formats. And I think if Texas Tech keeps it close, it's because they're scoring a lot of points. And that's exactly what we want for DFS. We know where the usage is going pretty much on both sides, and it's a very high scoring game. Maybe the biggest target game, even with such a big spread. Indiana, Michigan State. Indiana, the wagonest of all wagons in Power 5 football. Power 4, Pac-12. Curtis Rourke is expected back, but he does have an injured thumb on his throwing hand, which is concerning, but for 6,900, nice. It's worth a shot. He does spread the ball around to his receivers, though. Surratt is probably the favorite guy, and that's obviously why he's the most expensive. I don't mind it. I don't mind the passing game. It's cheap enough that, you can make it work if you wanted to stack Indiana. It is maybe running back by committee. It had been. Ellison had 29 carries last week. They had kind of been trending toward Ellison a little bit more. So if I were to pick a back out of this backfield, it's going to be Ellison, but that's not to say that Lawton's not going to be involved. That's not to say that Black isn't going to see the field. I do just think Ellison is in a much better spot than any of these guys, the way he's trending. And again, the wide receivers, they're just happy Rourke is back. Jackson was fine, but they're going to be very happy that Rourke is back if he is completely healthy. On the Michigan State side, just a cheap quarterback. Aiden Childs is just too cheap. $5,000. It's really what it is. He struggled to hit 3x that price this year, but and that the other thing too is do you just play Lagway for $200 cheaper? Maybe. But it's at Michigan State, so I do think that helps. And then you got Nate Carter, who's a sub 5K, maybe RB1. He actually looked like a real running back again last week. 19 carries for 118 yards and a touchdown against Michigan. He looked a lot better than he has all season. He disappeared and we thought KLA was going to be the guy, but Carter was back. So I don't mind taking a shot there. And then in the wide receiver core, we know where it's going to go. Marsh, Foster, and Velling are the target guys. Obviously, Velling and Foster being in the 3Ks, especially if you want to fit these high-priced running backs, you're going to look at these guys, even if you don't like Michigan State as a football team. Velling and Foster are getting targets. Velling is actually trending up quite a bit, and I think I'd rather try to attack Indiana through the pass game than the running game. So, again, it's a sneaky, stackable game. It might be gross. but you got some cheap options that can make it work to get some of those other expensive workhorse running backs elsewhere. Yeah, I don't mind that game at all. Last game on the main slate, Oregon at Michigan. Oregon is a 14.5-point road favorite, traveling 3 time zones. Dylan Gabriel, 9,100. The upside's always there. Jordan James, 8,300. Upside's always there. He's the workhorse back. Whittington at 3,700. I don't mind if Oregon can get ahead early. I don't know if they're going to be able to. But James is the guy in that backfield. And then Tez Johnson is the wide receiver who's going to get the most volume. Evan Stewart's still probably too cheap at 4,400. Holden, we'll have to see what his role is, if he can keep his spit in his mouth. And then Ferguson, still recovering from that appendectomy. If he's back, 3,400 for a tight end who plays like a wide receiver, I don't mind that at all. That's too cheap of a price tag. But if he doesn't go, Sadiq is going to get that run. But I think what we've seen with Ferguson out is that, we're just going to see more funnel to Johnson Stewart, and they've been running. So, it's a matchup at Michigan. It's maybe the last game Michigan can, they're kind of a good defense. I will give them that. So maybe a little bit tougher matchup for Oregon, but I think Oregon's pretty much matchup proof at this point. On the Michigan side, Jack Tuttle retired, so it's going to be the Davis Warren Alex Orji show. Don't really care much about them, but what I do notice that Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards are their cheapest prices of the season. Purdue ran for 208 yards on Oregon. Don't tell me Michigan can't do the same. These two guys just had weird games last week. They both had kind of floor games, so that's why their price is lowered. So I actually don't mind running one of these running backs, against Oregon while they're at home. And then Colston Loveland, sub 5K. He's a tight end, but he's wide receiver 1. Even in this offense, he had 8 targets and a couple of touchdowns last week. So he's still going to get his looks regardless of who's playing quarterback. It's gross, but I could see like a Mullings Loveland and then run it back with a Gabriel Johnson or Gabriel James or Gabriel Stewart or however you want to do it. It's not pretty, but it's possible. I'm just throwing that out there. That covers the main slate. If you think this is a boring looking sheet with not enough color, this is what it normally looks like. This is what it looks like for subscribers. Actually, this isn't exactly what it looks like. Navy and North Texas should be colored, but on the export I used last week, they weren't for whatever reason. But that's because we have guys colored if they are under cash consideration, high upside, GPP. We have the team totals that we show on the YouTube show too, but then we have the pace of play, the pass defense, the rush defense. How much do they run? How much do they pass? How many targets does this guy get? How many rushes does this guy get? It's just all the information that you need all in one spot. So if you like the color of this stone and the information on this stone a lot better than what you see here, just join us at SHIPIT Nation. That's all it takes. We have a bunch of different packages for whatever you want. We have the all access package, which is what I would recommend right now because NBA and NHL are now in full swing. Baseball just ended, but we'll have it again next year, I promise. The MMA is still going. NASCAR, we have everything. The swing season of PGA, we're off this week, but we'll be back at it next week. And then obviously NFL and college football are king. It's just the way it goes. And the pricing isn't going to bend you over. We want you to pay for your contests, not your content. So $700 a year is the best value in my opinion, but even if you just want to try it for a week, it's $24. And then we also have an optimizer. If you want to use it, you can. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. It's just an add-on if you like it. Or if you just want to do football or PGA, you can do that too. If you just want to try out one sport, PGA is your favorite sport, and you want to try that, go for it. Football does come with NFL and college football all in one. So you can do packages for those with or without the optimizer as well. And if not just for the coloring of the stone and that information, look at the flags at the top of leaderboards. Titletown winning, MMA. He's just always winning. We always have somebody winning MMA in our community. Ham Hock has been crushing it at college football this year. The master of GPPs when it comes to CFB, and just a lot of number ones. A lot of number ones next to SHIPIT Nation flags. So not only do we have the best content, we have the best community. One of the best Discords I've ever been a part of, if not the best. So it goes beyond what's on our website. It goes beyond the resources we provide you. It's the discussions, the game theory, as you will, for DFS. So come on over to SHIPIT Nation. We're not trying to break your bank. We just want to make you a better DFS player and help your process. But as we head into this weekend, always remember rule number 1, college football is fun. Like I said, enjoy the process, enjoy building your lineups, enjoy the sweats, and hopefully I will see you at the top of the leaderboards But for now, we'll see you next week.